My wife thought I was clueless until police dragged their stuck bodies from my house, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from when I still believed in things like trust and 15-year marriages meaning something. My name is John Matthews. I'm 43 years old, work in corporate finance for a mid-sized firm in suburban Connecticut, and until recently, I thought I had life figured out. Not spectacular, mind you, just figured out. Claire and I had built what I considered a solid partnership over 15 years. No kids, but that was a mutual decision we'd made early on. We had our routines, coffee together before work, quiet dinners at 7:30, weekend drives to the farmer's market. The intimacy had tapered off. What marriage doesn't experience that? But I attributed it to age, work stress, the natural progression of long-term relationships. Claire worked as an office manager for a dental practice, nothing glamorous but steady. At 39, she still turned heads when we went out, something I'd grown comfortable with over the years. The attention of other men had always seemed to amuse her without tempting her. Or so I believed. That Saturday in March started like any other. We'd driven to the park for our usual weekend walk, the spring air still carrying winter's bite. Claire had worn her oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky, a habit I'd always found endearing. "Honey, can you grab my regular glasses from the car?" she asked me, squinting at her phone. "These are too dark to read in this light." I jogged back to her Lexus, whistling some forgotten tune. Her purse sat on the passenger seat, but I knew she kept a spare pair in the glove compartment. As I reached for it, my hand knocked something under the passenger seat. Curious, I bent down and felt around until my fingers closed on a small bottle, personal lubricant, KY Intense, the kind specifically designed for enhancement. I stood there in the parking lot, holding this bottle like it was a live grenade. My mind ran through a catalog of explanations, each more pathetic than the last. Maybe she bought it for us? But we hadn't been intimate in 3 months. Maybe it was old? The receipt tucked under the bottle was dated 2 weeks ago. The bottle had been deliberately hidden, pushed far under the seat behind the floor mat rail. This wasn't something that had rolled out of a shopping bag. This was concealment. "Did you find them?" Claire's voice carried across the parking lot. I shoved the bottle back where I'd found it, grabbed her glasses from the glove compartment, and walked back with what I hoped was a normal expression. My face felt like a mask that might crack if I smiled too wide. "Here you go," I said, handing her the glasses. She swapped them out, looked at me, and her brow furrowed slightly. "You okay?" "You look pale," she observed. "Just winded from the jog," I lied. "Not as young as I used to be." She laughed, a light tinkling sound that I'd loved for 15 years. Now it sounded different. Practiced. Performance. We finished our walk, Claire chatting about her week, office gossip, plans for spring cleaning. I nodded and responded appropriately while my mind dissected every word, searching for tells, lies, slips. When had I become suspicious of my own wife? About 10 minutes ago, apparently. That night, I lay in bed next to her sleeping form, studying the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. Her breathing was deep and even, the sleep of someone without guilt. Or someone who'd grown comfortable with deception. The lubricant wasn't for us. I knew that with absolute certainty, which meant it was for someone else. Someone she was seeing. Someone she was f***ing while I sat in my office calculating quarterly projections. I could confront her. Wake her up right now, demand answers, have the fight that would end with either reconciliation or lawyers. That's what most men would do. That's what emotional men would do. But I'd built my career on being methodical, strategic, thorough. You don't make accusations in boardrooms without documentation. You don't enter negotiations without leverage. I wasn't going to be the fool who confronted his cheating wife with nothing but suspicion. I was going to be the man who destroyed her with evidence. I became someone else in the days that followed. A man living 2 lives, separated by a membrane so thin I sometimes forgot which was real. By day, I was John Matthews, devoted husband, bringing Claire coffee in bed, asking about her day, maintaining our routines with suffocating normalcy. By night, I was something else entirely, calculating, methodical, preparing for war with the patience of a sniper. Monday morning, Claire left for work with her usual kiss on my cheek. The moment her car turned the corner, I was in motion. The lubricant bottle. I needed to see it again, study it, understand it. I found it exactly where I'd left it, wedged behind the floor mat rail like a dirty secret. This time I photographed it from every angle, documenting its position, the receipt, the brand. KY Intense. I'd looked it up. Designed for heightened sensation and passionate encounters. Not the kind of thing a woman buys for a husband she barely touches. When the idea struck me, I drove to 3 different stores to avoid suspicion, purchasing supplies with cash, superglue, the industrial kind used for automotive repairs, a small syringe from a hobby shop, latex gloves from a pharmacy. I felt like a criminal preparing for a heist, except I was planning something far more personal. Back home, I worked with surgical precision. The KY bottle's cap unscrewed easily. These things weren't designed for security. Using the syringe, I extracted most of the lubricant and replaced it with the superglue, carefully maintaining the same weight and consistency. The real art was in resealing the cap. I applied a thin layer of adhesive to the threads, just enough to create a bond that would require significant force to break. When it did open, it would seem like normal resistance, maybe a sticky cap. They'd never suspect the contents had been replaced until it was far too late. I returned the bottle to its hiding spot, ensuring everything looked undisturbed. Claire would never know I'd found her secret. Not yet. Phase 2 began that evening. "Honey," I said to her over dinner, cutting into my steak with practiced calm, "I've been thinking about home security." Claire looked up from her salad. "Home security?" she asked. "There have been break-ins in the Riverside neighborhood. 3 in the last month," I explained. This was true. I'd researched it carefully. "I want to install cameras. Nothing invasive, just enough to keep us safe." She shrugged. "If it makes you feel better," she replied. "You know I don't pay attention to that tech stuff." Perfect. Her disinterest in technology would be her downfall. I spent the next 3 days installing a state-of-the-art system. Hidden cameras in smoke detectors, motion sensors that looked like air fresheners, even one disguised as a phone charger in our bedroom. All of it connected to a cloud server accessible from my phone. I made a show of installing obvious cameras at the front and back doors, decoys for Claire to see and feel safe about. "You're so thorough," she commented, watching me adjust the front door camera. "I love how you take care of us." Us. The word tasted like ash. My preparations extended beyond surveillance. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, transferred small amounts that wouldn't be noticed, photographed every document in our filing cabinet, tax returns, investment statements, the prenuptial agreement we'd signed 15 years ago when we were young and in love and stupid enough to think we'd never need it. The prenup had been her father's idea, actually. He'd insisted, wanting to protect his daughter's future inheritance. The irony was delicious. It protected my assets in case of adultery. Claire had laughed when signing it. "Like either of us would ever cheat," she'd said at the time. I consulted 3 divorce attorneys, paying cash for consultations using a fake name. "Just research," I told them. "Hypothetical scenarios." They all said the same thing. With video evidence of adultery and a solid prenup, she'd get nothing. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy while my world tilted off its axis. Claire would curl against me on the couch, and I'd force myself not to recoil. She'd tell me about her day, and I'd analyze every word for deception. When she said she was having lunch with her friend Sarah, I'd check Sarah's Instagram later. No photos of lunch, no mentions of Claire. The lies accumulated like evidence in a court case. Working late became her favorite excuse, though the dental office closed at 5. Shopping trips that produced no bags. A new password on her phone, she claimed, was for security at work. Thursday night, she was particularly affectionate, running her fingers through my hair while we watched TV. "I love you," she said suddenly. "I love you too," I replied automatically. The words hollow. "I was thinking," she continued, "you work so hard. You should take a trip. That conference in Chicago you mentioned last month. You should go." I hadn't mentioned any conference, but I played along. "Maybe you're right," I agreed. "You could go next week." "Take a whole week, relax, network." "I'll be fine here," she suggested enthusiastically. There it was. She was trying to clear me out. Create space for whatever she had planned. Actually, I said, the plan crystallizing instantly. That's a great idea. I'll book it tomorrow. She smiled, genuinely pleased. I saw it then, the excitement she couldn't quite hide, the anticipation of freedom. That night I created an elaborate fiction. Flights, hotel reservations, conference schedules. I printed everything, left it casually on my dresser for her to see. I even packed a suitcase, complete with conference-appropriate attire. Sunday came too quickly and not fast enough. Claire drove me to the airport, kissing me goodbye with enthusiasm that felt like a performance. "Have a great week," she said brightly. "Don't work too hard." "I'll miss you," I told her, meaning it in a way she'd never understand. I would miss the woman I thought I'd married, the life I thought we'd built. I watched her drive away, then caught a cab to the Hampton Inn 15 minutes from our house. Room 237, paid for in cash under another name. I set up my laptop, connected to our home security system, and settled in to watch my marriage implode. As I watched her wave goodbye from our front door through the security camera, I realized I wasn't leaving for a business trip. I was leaving to watch my wife destroy herself. Monday passed without incident. Claire went to work, came home, made herself dinner, watched Netflix. She seemed restless, checking her phone constantly, but nothing happened. I sat in my hotel room eating takeout and wondering if I'd misread everything. Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. The motion alert hit my phone at 2:47 p.m. Claire's car in the driveway, 3 hours before the dental office closed. My heart hammered as I opened the security app, switching to the front door camera. She wasn't alone, a black BMW pulled in behind her. Late model, tinted windows, the kind of car that screamed compensation. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man who made my stomach clench with recognition and rage. Not recognition because I knew him, I'd never seen him before, but recognition of a type. Tall, maybe 6'2", dark hair styled with product. The kind of build that came from gym selfies and protein shakes. 35 at most, wearing a tight polo that showed off arms Claire would find irresistible. He walked to our front door, my front door, with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. I switched to the living room camera as they entered. The familiarity between them was immediate, practiced. He didn't look around with curiosity like a first-time visitor. He knew where to hang his jacket, which way the kitchen was. This wasn't new. "God, I missed you," he said, pulling her against him. "Derek," she breathed against his mouth. "It's been too long." Derek, now he had a name. I screenshot everything, recorded everything. My hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. They kissed like teenagers, hungry and graceless. His hands were all over her, and she was laughing. That genuine, throaty laugh I hadn't heard in years. When was the last time she'd laughed like that with me? "Want some wine?" she offered. "Later," he replied, already pulling her toward the hallway. "I've been thinking about you all week." They moved past the camera's range, but I knew where they were going. Not our bedroom. Even Claire had that much decency, apparently. The guest room camera activated, and I forced myself to watch. Evidence. I needed evidence. They were on each other immediately, clothes disappearing with practiced efficiency. No awkwardness, no hesitation. They'd choreographed this dance many times before. How many times had she done this while I was at work? How many times in our house, in our bed? I watched Derek reach for Claire's purse. She must have told him where she kept it. He pulled out the bottle of lubricant and my pulse quickened. This was it. "Jesus, this cap is stuck," he muttered, twisting hard. "Just pull it," she said impatiently. Already naked and waiting, he yanked harder. I could see his forearms straining, the kind of effort that would definitely break my seal. There was an audible pop as it gave way. What happened next was both horrible and perfectly justified. They'd applied it liberally. Too caught up in passion to notice the unusual consistency, the slightly different smell. Superglue doesn't work instantly. It needs a moment, pressure, skin contact. They gave it all 3. The screaming started about 90 seconds later. "What the hell?" Derek shouted, his voice high with panic. Oh God, something's wrong!" Claire was crying out, her voice shrill with pain and terror. I watched them realize what was happening, the horror dawning as they tried to separate and couldn't. Derek attempted to pull away, causing Claire to scream louder. They were stuck in the most intimate, humiliating way possible. "What is this?" Derek was examining the bottle, his face contorting. This is glue! This is friggin' glue!" he yelled. "That's impossible!" Claire sobbed. "I bought it myself, She stopped mid-sentence, and I saw the moment of realization cross her face. Not full understanding, but the first crack of suspicion. They tried everything. Derek, in his panic, attempted brute force, causing both of them to howl in agony. Claire begged him to stop, then suggested water. They managed an awkward shuffle to the guest bathroom, but water did nothing to industrial adhesive. Their skin was bonded at the molecular level. "We need help," Claire whimpered. "We need an ambulance. Are you insane?" Derek's voice was pure panic. "We can't." "How would we explain?" he asked desperately. "I don't care!" she screamed back. "I don't care anymore. This hurts so much. Please, just call." I watched Derek fumble for his phone, trying to maintain some dignity while literally attached to my wife. The conversation with 911 was almost comedic in its horror. "We need an ambulance," he said urgently. Then he paused, struggling with the words. "No, we're not injured exactly. We're stuck together." "No, not trapped. Stuck? With adhesive. Please, just send someone." Claire was crying uncontrollably now, the kind of deep, humiliated sobs that came from realizing your life was about to change forever. She was right about that. The dispatcher must have thought it was a prank at first, but Derek's desperate insistence finally convinced them. I heard him give our address, my address, and say the words that would doom them both. "Please hurry, and maybe be discreet," he pleaded. There would be no discretion. Not for this. I checked out of the hotel methodically, taking my time. No need to rush. They weren't going anywhere. The 15-minute drive home felt like a victory lap. Every red light was a moment to savor what was coming. As I turned onto our street, I could see the ambulance in our driveway, lights flashing like a beacon calling every neighbor to witness. Mrs. Bennett from next door was already on her lawn, phone in hand. The teenage Parker boys were recording from their bikes. I parked slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw me arrive, making sure they knew I was coming home to this. As I drove toward the house I'd shared with Claire for 15 years, I realized I wasn't going home to comfort my wife. I was going home to watch her world end. The scene inside my house was organized chaos. 2 paramedics knelt beside the guest bed, their professional composure cracking at the edges. A police officer stood near the door, notepad in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The smell hit me first, adhesive remover, sharp and chemical, mixing with the musty scent of fear sweat. "Sir, you can't," the officer started to say. "I'm John Matthews," I interrupted calmly, producing my driver's license. "This is my house." "That's my wife." The officer's face went through several expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and finally, deep discomfort. "Mr. Matthews, there's been an incident," he said awkwardly. "So I see," I replied, stepping past him. The guest bedroom door was open. What I saw there was better than anything I'd imagined. Claire and Derek were covered, barely by medical sheets, but their predicament was obvious. The paramedics had managed to separate some of their skin using chemical solvents, but the most intimate areas remained bonded. Claire's face was red and swollen from crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks in black rivers. Derek wouldn't look at anyone, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Sir, you can't—" One of the paramedics began to protest. "Insurance documentation," I said smoothly. "I'll need evidence for the claim." Claire's eyes found mine through her tears, and I watched her face transform. Horror, understanding, and finally, naked fear. "John," she whispered. "Oh God, John, I can explain." "No need," I cut her off, keeping the camera steady. "The situation rather explains itself." Derek finally looked up and our eyes met. This was the man who'd been in my house, in my bed, inside my wife. This younger, stronger, more handsome man who thought he could take what was mine without consequence. "Listen, man," he started, his voice strained. "We didn't know. Someone switched the rage I'd kept carefully contained for a week erupted. I crossed the room in 2 strides and drove my fist into his jaw with 15 years of suppressed fury. His head snapped back, blood exploding from his nose across the medical sheet, across my wife's skin. "That's for using my house," I said quietly, shaking out my hand. "And my wife." The room exploded into motion. The paramedics rushed to separate us while the officer stepped between Derek and me. Claire was screaming, not from pain this time, but from the realization that her world was collapsing. "Do you want to press charges?" The officer asked Derek, who was holding his bleeding nose. "Against him?" Derek spat blood. "He attacked me!" he protested angrily. "You're trespassing in his house," the officer pointed out. "With his wife. I'd say you got off easy." I turned to the officer. "Am I free to document this for insurance purposes?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's your house," he confirmed. I continued filming, capturing everything. The medical equipment, the chemical bottles, the blood on the sheets, Claire trying to cover herself while still attached to her lover. Derek's face, now swelling beautifully. "We need to transport them," one paramedic announced. "They'll need surgical separation at the hospital." "Together?" I asked innocently. "In the same ambulance?" "We don't have a choice," the paramedic replied, clearly wishing he'd called in sick today. As they prepared Claire and Derek for transport, a process that involved a specially modified gurney and a lot of awkward positioning, I followed them out. The crowd outside had grown. Half the neighborhood was there, phones out, recording everything. Mrs. Bennett looked scandalized and delighted. The Parker boys were live streaming. Claire saw them all, and fresh tears streamed down her face. "Please," she begged the paramedics, "can't you cover us more?" But there was no covering this. No hiding what she'd done, what she'd become. As they loaded her into the ambulance, still grotesquely attached to Derek like some medieval punishment for adultery, our eyes met one last time. "How?" she mouthed silently. I just smiled and kept filming. The ambulance doors closed, but the show wasn't over. I turned to address the crowd, my neighbors, the people we'd barbecued with, whose kids we'd watched, whose lives had intersected with ours for years. "I apologize for the disturbance," I announced formally. "I've been in Chicago all week for business. Came home early to surprise my wife." I paused, letting the irony sink in. "Surprise!" someone actually applauded. Others laughed nervously. Mrs. Bennett approached me, her face a mask of sympathy. "John, dear, if you need anything," she offered kindly. "Actually," I said loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "if anyone has video of what happened here today, I'd appreciate copies. For the divorce proceedings." At least 6 people immediately offered to send me footage. I went back inside my house, not ours anymore, and poured myself a scotch. The good stuff, the 20-year Macallan I'd been saving for a special occasion. If this didn't qualify, nothing would. My phone was already buzzing. Text messages, Facebook notifications, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The story was spreading like wildfire through our social circles. By tomorrow, everyone would know. I made 2 calls. First, Dylan Caldwell, the best divorce attorney I'd found during my research. "Dylan, it's John Matthews. Remember that hypothetical situation we discussed?" "It's not hypothetical anymore," I said. "How bad?" he asked immediately. She was literally glued to him. "The paramedics just took them away, still attached," I explained. There was silence then. "I'll clear my schedule." "Can you come in tomorrow?" he asked. 9 a.m., I suggested. "Bring everything. Videos, photos, financial documents, everything," he instructed. The second call was to my office. "Jim, it's John. I need to extend my time off," I said. "Family emergency," I added. He expressed concern, and I continued. "Yes, Claire and I are separating." After his sympathetic response, I said, "I appreciate that. Another week should do it. Thanks for understanding." I sat in my living room, in the house I'd worked 15 years to pay for, and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The waiting was over. The pretending was done. Tomorrow I'd begin the process of taking apart Claire's life piece by piece, legally and thoroughly. As I watched my wife disappear into that ambulance, still attached to her lover like some twisted warning to other cheaters, I realized my real work was just beginning. Dylan Caldwell's office occupied the top floor of a glass building overlooking downtown Hartford. Expensive art, leather furniture, the kind of place that whispered, "You can't afford me," to most visitors. But I could afford him, and more importantly, I could afford to destroy Claire properly. Dylan watched the footage on my phone with the expression of a man witnessing a miracle. "In 30 years of practice," he said, setting down the phone, "I've never seen anything like this. This is beautiful." "I have 8 different angles from neighbors," I added, sliding a thumb drive across his desk. "Plus all the security footage from my house showing their affair." He opened the prenuptial agreement, scanning the adultery clause Claire's father had insisted upon. The irony remained delicious. "She gets nothing," Dylan confirmed. "The house is in your name, purchased before marriage. The investment accounts are protected. The retirement funds are yours. With this evidence, she won't even get alimony." "What can she fight for?" I asked. "Realistically, her personal belongings and her car, which I see is in her name. Maybe some cash for moving expenses if she has a sympathetic judge," he explained. "But John—" He leaned forward. "No judge will be sympathetic after seeing this footage. We filed that afternoon. Dylan had the papers drawn up in record time, citing adultery with photographic and video evidence attached. He also filed an emergency motion for exclusive use of the marital home, arguing that Claire had defiled it with her affair." "Defiled?" I questioned. "Legal term," Dylan grinned. "Judges eat that biblical stuff up." While the legal machinery churned into motion, the social destruction was happening organically. Someone, probably one of the Parker boys, had posted the video online with the title, "Cheating Wife Literally Glued to Lover." It went viral within hours. Not globally viral, but Connecticut viral, which was enough. Claire's Facebook page disappeared by evening. Derek's Instagram went private, then vanished entirely. I learned from the hospital grapevine, amazing how many people suddenly wanted to talk to me, that the surgical separation had taken 3 hours. They'd needed a plastic surgeon to minimize scarring, though some would be permanent. Both were kept overnight for observation and to manage the risk of infection. Derek disappeared immediately after discharge. His BMW never returned to our street. His apartment, I'd found the address through some creative searching, showed a moving truck 2 days later. Claire tried calling him dozens of times according to the phone records Dylan subpoenaed, but they all went unanswered. He'd vanished like smoke, leaving Claire to face the consequences alone. She showed up at the house on Thursday, escorted by a police officer per the emergency order. She was allowed 2 hours to pack personal belongings under supervision. I stayed in my office, door locked, listening to her sob as she filled suitcases. "Can I talk to him?" I heard her ask the officer. "Just for 5 minutes?" "Ma'am, that would violate the order," the officer responded. "You'll have your chance in court." When she left, I found she'd taken only clothes and toiletries. Our wedding photos remained on the walls. Her jewelry, gifts I'd given her over the years, sat untouched in the bedroom. Either she felt too guilty to take them, or knew they'd be worthless in the face of what she'd lost. The divorce proceedings moved with unusual speed. Claire's attorney, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Morse, tried her best with an impossible case. "My client claims she was set up," Patricia argued at the first hearing. "Someone tampered with her personal items." "Your client," Dylan responded smoothly, "was engaged in adultery in the marital home. Whether she chose the wrong lubricant is irrelevant to the fact of her infidelity, which is documented extensively. The judge, a stern woman named Harriet Powell, reviewed the evidence with barely concealed disgust. "Mrs. Matthews," she addressed Claire directly, "do you deny having an affair?" Claire, wearing a conservative dress that couldn't hide the faint scars on her neck, whispered, "No, Your Honor." "Do you deny bringing your lover into the marital home?" The judge continued. "No, Your Honor," she whispered again. "Then the court sees no relevance in your claim of tampering," Judge Powell declared. "The prenuptial agreement is clear and valid. Adultery voids any claim to marital assets. The final decree was brutal in its simplicity. Claire received her car, her personal belongings, and a cash payment of $5,000. My idea, actually. enough for a security deposit and first month's rent somewhere. I wasn't a monster. I just wanted justice. Dylan handled everything brilliantly. Claire's attempts to claim emotional abuse fell flat. Her lawyer's suggestion that I'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing was dismissed as desperate speculation without evidence. Even if Mr. Matthews had somehow switched the contents, Judge Powell noted, it wouldn't change the fundamental fact of adultery. This court will not reward infidelity because the cheating party chose an unfortunate lubricant. Someone in the gallery actually snickered. The last time I saw Claire was at the final settlement meeting. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and hollow. The confident woman who'd laughed with her lover in my living room was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken. Why? She asked when the lawyer stepped out to file the final papers. If you knew, why didn't you just divorce me? I considered lying, giving her some comfort. But she deserved the truth. Because you made me a fool, I said simply. In my own house, in my own bed. You didn't just cheat, Claire. You humiliated me. So I returned the favor. I loved you, she whispered. No, I replied firmly. You loved the life I provided. There's a difference. She signed the papers without another word. Later, I learned through the suburban gossip network that she'd moved 2 towns away, found a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic. The story had followed her. Small towns have long memories for spectacular scandals. Someone told me they'd seen her at a grocery store, head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Derek Paulson vanished completely. Some said he'd moved to California. Others claimed he was in Florida. One persistent rumor suggested he'd changed his name. I didn't care enough to investigate. As Claire walked out of that conference room with nothing but the clothes on her back, I realized that revenge wasn't just a dish best served cold. It was a feast best served with witnesses. 6 months later, my life has found its rhythm. The house feels different now. Not empty, just honest. I've redecorated the guest room, turned it into a home office. The security cameras remain active, though they mostly capture delivery drivers and the occasional raccoon. Old habits. The story has become suburban legend. I'm the guy whose wife got glued to her lover, spoken with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. Women at the gym suddenly find excuses to chat. My neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, regularly brings over casseroles and mentions her divorced daughter, who's about your age and very accomplished. I delete the dating app matches without reading them. 3 women from neighboring towns have reached out on Facebook, all mentioning they'd heard about my situation and admiring how I handled things. My story, it seems, has become a litmus test for a certain type of woman, ones who appreciate calculated justice over emotional explosion. I'm not ready for that. May never be. Claire lives 30 miles away now, in a studio apartment above a pizza shop. I know this not because I've stalked her, but because mutual acquaintances can't help but update me. She works at a medical clinic, drives a 10-year-old Honda, keeps to herself. Someone mentioned seeing her at a coffee shop, reading alone, looking resigned. That's the word they used, resigned. The financial settlement left me comfortable. The house is worth more without the weight of a failed marriage. My investment portfolio, no longer supporting 2 people, has grown substantially. I've taken up golf, joined a book club, started learning Italian, cliché middle-aged divorce activities. But they fill the time. Sometimes late at night I wonder if I went too far, if simple divorce would have been enough. Then I remember the sound of her laughing with Derek in our living room, the practiced ease with which they'd moved together, the months or years of deception I'll never fully uncover. No, I didn't go too far. I went exactly far enough. My phone buzzes with a text from Dylan Caldwell. He's handling another divorce and wants to know if I'd speak with his client, a man whose wife has been cheating with his business partner. He needs to know there's justice possible, Dylan writes. I agree to meet him. Not to share my methods, those were specific to my situation, but to share the philosophy. Document everything. Plan carefully. Strike decisively. Make the cost of betrayal so high that it becomes a cautionary tale. The man I meet is younger than me, maybe 35, with the shell-shocked look of recent discovery. Over coffee, I tell him an abbreviated version of my story. His eyes widen at the glue, narrow with appreciation at the planning. Did it make you feel better? he asks me. The revenge? No, I answer honestly. But it made me feel even. And sometimes that's enough. He nods, understanding. I sleep well these days. 8 hours straight, no nightmares, no regrets. My conscience is clear. I didn't create Claire's betrayal. I only ensured it had consequences. Spectacular, humiliating, publicly documented consequences that will follow her forever. Justice, I've learned, isn't always swift. But when it's properly planned, when every contingency is considered and every detail executed perfectly, it can be absolutely devastating. The cost of betrayal, it turns out, is everything. Claire paid it in full. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.